I'm making moss trees for my vivarium, for my frogs. Show you how to do it. You need some of this stuff. I use black. It's non-toxic to frogs once it's dry. Went for a walk in the woods, peeled some of this off of a rock. So there's minimal stuff underneath. If I took it off of bark, you'd bring some wood with it. So used a layer of this stuff on the moss. I cut off a twig off the tree, and before it dries, I'm going to stick it in there. And then once it's dry, you can trim it. It melts pretty. It cuts with a hot knife pretty easily. So I'm using a torch and an old crappy knife, and it trims up pretty good once it's dry. So before this dries, I'm going to stick this twig in here, and I'm going to prop it up and hold it so it dries straight up somehow. I'm propping it up with this, let it dry. Then to get the base on here, while it was still wet, I placed it on there and it dried, and then I made a base for it. And I'm going to take this plastic off now, and I'm going to carve it with a knife, like a tree up here and a base down there. Okay, hot knife. Just carve it to look like, well, to look natural, I guess, I don't know. Okay, it looks alright when you cut it with a hot knife and burn it. It kind of changes. Then you take your hot knife, trim the bottom there, and then spray some more on the base, and then put on some more moss. Cover it in moss, and this is some of the stuff I used to glue it on. It's kind of seeping out there, dried, expanded out, so I gotta trim that off. But when you're done, you get a nice little foam tree, not moss tree. So you kind of expand it out there. I'm gonna trim that off. And that's this one I did earlier. And this is the one that was shown in the video that I still have to work on. But when it's done, it'll look a lot like that or that. And I found some flat rocks. I just siliconed them on there. So I gotta do some trim work to these guys. Like there and there, where it's bubbled or expanded out. But two nice tree moss trees. Now when you add water, I noticed, to these guys, I put them in my frog aquarium and put on my fogger, and they green up pretty fast. Like the top here is all green, and this is kind of dried out, but this was dried out too, and then I just fogged it up, and it turns out pretty green. So I guess the moss kind of goes into a hibernation state or whatever that's called, but it greens up, it stays alive. So there you go. Moss trees for your amphibians or herps or reptiles or whatever. And I have chorus frogs. I noticed that they like to sit on natural bark or moss stuff as opposed to artificial stuff, like artificial rocks or artificial structures, decoration kind of things you can get for aquariums. They like the natural stuff as opposed to the artificial stuff, so they should like these. And see my other videos for how to make a cheap fogger from a desktop vaporizer and other things on frogs.